Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across this great country. If it's Tuesday, it's time for Cleveland, Ohio to come to the forefront. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cavaliers, Browns, Indians, move them out of the way. Peter Ray's opening up the American Sports History Podcast. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing, 347-205-9631. You can email mancinisports@yahoo.com. A lot of listeners are on. I know this show goes by quick. Catch the archive on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports, powered by Mancini Media. So without further ado, let me lay the red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic. It's more him, less than me. Peter, first of all, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third, another Emmy Award-winning guest.
Hi, Mark. The three questions. Let me try to remember them. Let's see. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name, Peter J. Ray, R-E-A. I've actually made videos on every year of Cleveland baseball history going back to 1869. 171 videos, including the 20 Negro League seasons. You're absolutely right about tonight's guest. He's a 30 years broadcaster, not just sports, other things as well on the radio, music, and so forth. College baseball, pro indoor football, college basketball, college football. And he's from Boscobel, Wisconsin, lives in Stockton, California. Welcome to the show. It's a real honor and a privilege to have on the show tonight Mr. Gary Ellenbolt.
Oh, my God. You take me for a much finer man than I am, and I think you probably need to raise your bar, Peter, but I'm not going to argue. It's good to be here, and thank you very much. I'm looking forward to our visit today.
You know, I love this quote you have on your Facebook page. We don't go on because we're ready. We go on because it's 11:30 by Lorne Michaels. Wonderful quote.
That's a producer of Saturday Night Live, and I heard that once when I was a longtime morning edition host at South Dakota Public Broadcasting, and I just thought, that's the story of my life, and something that I think would fit as a good epitaph someday, where, whether the show's ready or not, you've got live radio or live TV or whatever to do. That's one of the things that I really loved in my broadcasting career, especially doing radio, because if there was an error or something going on, that's on me. I'm not blaming some intern at the switcher or something like that. I did this and I get to own up to it because an entire state just heard me. So I like that sort of, I don't want to say pressure, but I guess challenge might be a good word for that.
Well, I like the thought because, we should try to prepare for whatever we're going to do, but, we obviously, there's only so much time, and, the time comes, it's showtime, and you do your best. And if it's not good enough, well, that's too bad.
And then there's the 90% of us who do that for a living who think it's never good enough.
Right.
We go home and we can have a terrific 3-hour broadcast, and then we think of that one time that we gave the wrong guy a foul, and that's what we dwell on until the next game. One of my broadcast heroes is kind of a variation of the theme, and I don't mean to hijack your show here, Peter, but just kind of while I'm thinking of it, and it's great advice to fledgling broadcasters, a fellow named Jim Irwin, who is one of my boyhood radio heroes. Now, you talk about a guy with a studly job. He worked at WTMJ in Milwaukee, which has been the Brewers' flagship just about forever, with the exception of a couple of years in the 1980s. But Jim Irwin was the sports director at WTMJ, and he also was the voice of the Milwaukee Bucks, the NBA team, the Green Bay Packers, and Wisconsin Badger football. So at the right time of the year, Jim Irwin could do a Bucks game on radio on Friday night, head to Camp Randall in Madison and take care of the Badger game, maybe have another Bucks game that night, and the Packers on Sunday. And talk about a guy probably with the greatest job in all of American sports broadcasting. But he said one time, in the course of a 3 or 3.5 hour live broadcast, where you're mostly ad-libbing, you are bound to say something stupid. And so what you need to do is just go get the next play. And I heard that probably 10 or 15 years ago, and that was an incredible comfort to me because in Well, 30 years of sports broadcasting, 40 years total. I can think of maybe 12 perfect air shifts or shows or games that I've had collectively. And so that means over 40 years, over thousands and thousands of days, I blew something somewhere. And so it's like, okay, we'll get the next one. We'll be okay.
Well, that's how life is. We're always facing the unexpected comes, and so what you do your best, and then you move on to the next unexpected event and situation, and what can you do? You do your best at that time, and that's all you can do.
Absolutely, and chances are you're the only one who either noticed a mistake or thought it was, and once you corrected yourself, that wipes the slate clean. And you just kind of move on to the next game, and hopefully people like what you do, although there will be those who don't like what you do no matter what it is, and you can't worry about it. But you just hope that the people who employ you see enough in you that you get to keep the job for a while.
Have you had much trouble with criticism during your career?
I haven't had a lot, which is good because I don't take it well. I'm
okay.
pretty thin-skinned for a broadcaster, and I think social media is the bane of the existence of just about everyone who's on the radio, because I think a lot of these people think all we do is sit down, someone turns a mic on, and we talk for that 3.5 or 4 hours. They don't see the prep time. They don't see the training. They don't see the interviewing that they do with the coaches. They don't see, the studying that you do. Maybe 1 hour for every half hour of game broadcast time or something. They think they're just going to walk in, call play-by-play, and they think that gives them a license to look at every mistake you do. I have a very good friend who used to do the University of Nebraska football on radio. A guy named Warren Swain, who's just the most decent human being I think I've ever met. And if you do Nebraska football on radio, you are working from what is the third largest city in Nebraska on game day, Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, and you don't dare say one thing wrong, or you're going to hear about it for a week. And he just got to the point, I think this is a really good idea, that he just never listened to or read the criticism anymore. So, during the season, when I have a team that I'm calling or there's a state tournament that I'm working or something, I really try hard to stay off social media. Part of that is sort of a painful lesson I learned when, I was trying to work and I took on a couple of those people at the same time. And don't do that. Experience, you're not going to win. Just go on, do the best job you can do, and be grateful that you have a family and a job that you can do that not a lot of people can. So, I kind of got an e-spanking for that, I suppose. And looking back, I deserved it. And, you can't let it get to you. But the problem is I don't realize that at the time it can't get to me, that it gets to me. And so, I guess I'm like every broadcaster, every performer with that egomaniacal need for approval, that people are going to love every word you say. And I don't think any of us have ever had that happen. I certainly haven't. I don't think you or Mark or anyone else has in your career. And you just can't worry about it. Otherwise, it will drive you crazy.
I make history videos, and it's funny. I don't know. Everyone has failure in life. We get criticized, and I think I've gotten plenty. And now I can laugh about it. Sometimes at least they're paying attention. I had some comments on some videos. One guy said it was completely incoherent. Another said it was a disgrace to the field of history. I thought that was pretty funny. Gary, can you give us an overview of your career as a broadcaster?
Oh, I'd love to, yes. And it was a ton of fun. I never got to the majors. Would love at least one day to tell everyone, especially those who didn't think that I could do it, that indeed I could. But started at a 500-watt daytime radio station in Lancaster, Wisconsin, which was when I was in college. And that job pretty much left me bereft of a life for the 3.5 years I was there while I was going to school at the same time. But it was an incredible training ground for me in that I found out the station owner, who was also the general manager, and basically they're all like that. They worry about a lot of things and a lot of the wrong things. I think I'm going to speak freely a little bit here, and if I've ever worked for you, I probably mean this. Anyone out there, I think broadcast managers are some of the worst in American business. You can't run a radio station the way you run a grocery store, the way you run a laundromat, or the way you run, a city sanitation department. You just can't do it and expect to succeed. Realizing there's a very small profit margin to be made while you're running the station, where most of the profit comes the day you sell it. But you have to have certain parameters, and I get that. But you kind of have to let the eccentric people be eccentric. And when a record is playing, when a guy is on the air, that's no time to go in there and tell him all the horrible things he's done wrong that day. The very first day I was on the air at WGLR, Lancaster, Wisconsin, we had a thing called the Trading Post. And the owner probably went into this 10-minute lecture after he told me why the front office is called that, because it's in the front of the building and that's where the offices are. So we called it the front office. And, I'm not as stupid as I look. Let me put it that way. So, we're doing the Trading Post, and he tells me, first of all, why we never take callers for the Trading Post, because they could swear, they could pull some kind of trick, and it only takes one, and there goes our license. And so he's worried about that, and he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to read this exactly verbatim, because Norma, who was the receptionist at the time, which is probably for another 4-hour show, but she typed all of the announcements that people would call in. And Norma, this guy said, is never going to make a mistake. She checks everything. Just read it exactly like you write it. Well, we had a two-headed Trading Post at the time, just kind of to break up the voices so the same guy's not droning for that 15 minutes. And so I'm being this professional first day on the air broadcaster, and I'm looking ahead to the things I'm going to read. And there's this 8.5 by 11 standard piece of paper, and it says, and I'm quoting this directly because I'll never forget it. It says April 12th, 1980. And I'm expected to read, wanted, one Siamese male for breeding purposes.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, now I was just told I have to read this verbatim. What's going to happen if I say I wanted one Siamese male for breeding purposes and give this phone number, and my career is over half hour after it started? Well, I read it. Wanted one Siamese male for breeding purposes, gave the phone number. I never heard another thing. So, maybe that's how you do it. But I went there. We were a daytime radio station, so it was hard to do sports. Most of the games go on at night. They built an FM my senior year, and I was slated to be the sports director and probably call 4 or 5 games a week for the nary a farthing they were planning to pay me. And the owner at the time couldn't understand why he couldn't make $500 a game every game with a brand new sports operation. Well, the station that he worked at forever was established and could get that, and there was no way he was going to. And so they canceled the sports coverage after the football season and decided my services weren't needed anymore. Well and good. Okay, so I'm shown the door in January of 1983. The competing station called about a week after that. I got a full-time position there after working part-time, more or less on the edge of destitution, but it's great training ground, great days. I go full-time in June of that year, able to work some college sports, color for the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, which is where my undergrad degree is from. Then I was working on the air one night, answered the telephone. It was a young lady who I thought I would eventually marry, which turned out not to be true, but didn't find that out until after I moved 250 miles to be with her. So I'm stuck at this job with maybe a listener and a half in a small town just outside the Twin Cities. And I had no one, nothing left. It's an incredibly expensive place to live. So, you get really creative with turkey legs when you're in a situation like that. And so for months at a time, to this day, I can't go near a turkey leg unless I'm in a really special situation. But had a chance to work high school football and basketball. University of Wisconsin River Falls did not have a commercial voice at the time, and it was just down the road. So we signed on to those games for a couple of years. From there, I spent 3 horrifying months in southwestern Minnesota. Went to Sioux City, Iowa from there, where I got my first taste of really long-term college play-by-play. I did Morningside College, now Morningside University. At the time, a member of NCAA Division II, and basically the claim to fame of the football program is twofold. First of all, it was the first head coaching job of George Allen back in 1948. And secondly, the teams that I covered from 1992 to 1997 basically were known for gaining the respect of everyone who wanted to get home early, is probably a kind way to put that. They didn't win a lot. They were in a conference. Well, North Dakota State was in the league at the time, University of North Dakota, South Dakota State, which just fell in the Division I FCS championship to Sam Houston State. And so it was a tough league. It was a private school. Didn't win much in football. Did really well in basketball. Went to the national tournament 1996, I guess it was. And from there, I was getting a little bit burned out for several factors. Been at the station 10 years. Got 10 years older for it. Had some good times. Went to program a news talk station just up the road, same market, Sioux City. Had some really good numbers and worked with some really decent people. The owner was an absentee owner in Louisiana, which is really a good situation because you can go ahead and do pretty much what you think you have to do as long as you're making money. Then you don't have to worry about ownership coming down on you. 4.5 years of basically a 24/7 job. I couldn't do that anymore. So in May of 2002, I ended up at South Dakota Public Broadcasting, was there 17 years, and probably at about the first third of my tenure, this was a statewide radio and television network, and we ended up with the broadcast rights for South Dakota State High School Championships. And I worked a couple of the football games every year, and then my broadcast partner, wonderful guy, still one of my favorite people, named John Sieber, and I would call the lower class tournaments. There are 3 classes in South Dakota for basketball, AA, A, B, and we love going to small town tournaments, the B schools, which is always at the Barnett Center at Northern State University in Aberdeen, and just couldn't wait for March every year. And John Sieber's the kind of guy I think we need to work with at least once, if only to stay, whatever side of sane we're lucky enough to stay on. But we could finish each other's thoughts. One of our hobbies at tournament time was trying to out-prep the other guy, and put together some great broadcasts on a statewide network. I have some great memories of some of the state tournaments that we can go into in a little bit if you'd like to do that. But then my son who's in the military in California, and his wife blessed us with a grandchild. And so we thought, we're in South Dakota, they're in California, and I'd kind of like to watch Leia grow up. So we moved out here a couple of years ago. My broadcasting is now limited to public address for the Stockton Ports, which is the low-A affiliate of the Athletics, and also do some work for the University of the Pacific, which is a Division I school in town. So, I've just about done everything you could be expected to do in broadcasting. And while I miss the people and a lot of the nuts and bolts, I'm in a good place. Yeah, I work for the Department of Transportation here, so I go from, one profession where everybody hates you to another profession where they hate you even more than the first one. But, it's a good life. I've got a great family. Jesus and I are on really good terms thanks to getting dumped in Hudson, Wisconsin. And, I will look back on my deathbed and say, hey, you know what, that's pretty cool. I'd take this life in a heartbeat if I knew it was coming.
One of my favorite, as a sports historian, one of my favorite ideas or teams are defunct teams that no longer exist. And because I'm a historian, and it's nice to remember, and they tend to be forgotten because they get there's nobody to promote them anymore except the fans. There's no pro team. Now this is before your time, but have you heard much over the years about the 1957 Milwaukee Braves who won the World Series, the only MLB title for Milwaukee? And that was kind of a strange situation when the Milwaukee Braves come to town. They were there maybe 10 years and really popular, and they won the World Series and super high attendance, and then they're gone. So do you hear much talk about the 1957 Milwaukee Braves?
I have read several books on the Braves, and I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I think the first thing that really put the Braves on shaky ground was the death of Fred Miller Jr., who was the head of Miller Brewing. They were instrumental in talking Lou Perini into bringing the Boston Braves to Milwaukee. Milwaukee had the AAA team for the Braves at the time, the Milwaukee Brewers, played at Borchard Field in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee County built what was County Stadium in 1953 in the interest of landing a major league franchise. They almost got the St. Louis Browns, but Lou Perini, the Boston Braves owner, said, well, we have the territorial rights, so we're not going to let this happen, Mr. Beck. And so they became the Baltimore Orioles. A year later, in March of 1953, Lou Perini says, hey, we're going to Milwaukee. We're not getting it done in Boston. And you'd have just thought that every citizen of Milwaukee had the keys to the kingdom. I mean, you were listening to Earl Gillespie on the broadcasts every night. You were going to County Stadium. And Fred Miller Jr. had a lot to do with that in convincing Lou Perini. He bought and had the scoreboard built in right center field at County Stadium. But he was killed in a plane crash in just a few years after the Braves had won. They're come to Milwaukee. They'd won the World Series. That was a part of what happened. Another part is that for probably the first 6 or 7 years of the franchise in Milwaukee, you could bring your own beer into the stadium. And it just boggles me that any franchise would do that now. That's pretty much gone the way of the Twilight doubleheader. But until about 1960 or 1961, there were guys who would bring entire cases, if not 2, if not 3, to the ballpark. Of course, you're going to cut down on revenue because beer is a very popular seller, and you could still get beer at the ballpark. But then he figured, Perini figured, why should they have that revenue when I could have it? They did that, Lou Perini was just death on a TV contract. Even as late as 1959, the Braves were the only team in the majors that did not have a TV contract because the management thought that it would hold down the crowds for the home games. Airing the road games didn't seem to occur to the folks there. Then he sold to the Bartholomew Group, who actually had their offices first in Chicago, then went to Atlanta. So, you could have no nose at all and smell what was going to go on there. Then they moved to Atlanta in 1966. It was going to be 65, but the federal court said no, have to give them one more year so that they can fill the lease at County Stadium. And, I've heard quite a bit about the Braves. I've, like I said, read a few books and watched a few of the TV shows and that kind of thing. And it's a sad story, but I know they are, and I am glad that the Brewers are there and really doing pretty well.
One of my favorite teams of all time is the 1982 Milwaukee Brewers. I was right out of college. I was not doing well, and I watched. I was riveted to every game. I know the Brewers won Game 1 10-0, and they had such a cool team. They had, Gorman. We had Gorman Thomas in Cleveland. I thought, he was such a cool guy. Raleigh Fingers, Sal Bando, and Don Sutton from the. Anyway, you want to talk about the 1982 Milwaukee Brewers, American League champions?
Brewers started out not doing very well in 1982. Buck Rogers was the manager, and he was kind of a micromanager. And if you know the characters on that Brewer team, these aren't the kind of guys you micromanage. So on June 2nd, Buck Rogers was fired. Harvey Keene became the manager. He had a team meeting that night in Seattle, and all he said in that meeting was, go have fun. And so the rest of the summer was just magical in the state of Wisconsin. Everybody was talking about the Brewers. Everyone figured that the World Series was going to come to Milwaukee, which it did, not without some drama, because they just had to win one game in Baltimore that final weekend of the season and waited until Sunday to pound on the Orioles. Lost 2 to the Angels in the first round of the championship series, the league championship series, came back to Milwaukee. Thank you, Cecil Cooper. They won the last 3. Then got to the series. Raleigh Fingers had been hurt probably late summer, early fall, or sometime in September. And there are people who tell you, Paul Molitor among them, that if Raleigh had been healthy for the 82 World Series, there's no way that would go to 7 games because Milwaukee would have won the thing. And I don't hold anything against Pete Ladd. He had his finger in the dike as best he could. That was a tough spot to throw old Bigfoot in. But, he did what he could. Game 7 was in St. Louis and a little rough, and I can still see Gorman is swinging and missing at that Bruce Sutter pitch that essentially ended the season. And that was the last time the Brewers made the World Series. Came close a year or so ago when they took the Dodgers to 7 games. But I think the Wisconsin, certainly the Milwaukee populace, pretty wary when the Seattle Pilots folded and came to town, became the Brewers 4 days before the start of the 1970 season. They said, hey, one team left us. What's to stop you? Well, what stopped them was Miller Park. They got that built, which I have never been to, unfortunately, and now I'm probably 2,500 miles removed. But, anything can happen, I guess. And you have to like the makeup of this team, especially the pitching that they have here in 2021. And you just have to see what happens. As Sparky Anderson said, you win as many pennants in October as you do in April. So you can't get too excited. I try to just hold up until maybe the All-Star break. And then if a team's playing well, I'm really going to get behind it and pay more attention than I would normally. But that 82 season, just a thing of beauty. Then in 83, there was never a double play they couldn't ground into in that last month of the year, and lost a fairly substantial lead in the American League East. Rene Latchman came in 84, and it was just dreadful. A lot of the stars were older. Gorman had been traded, and I've just about forgiven management for that because he was my all-time favorite player and a guy. And I think you'll agree with this from the Cleveland standpoint. Gorman Thomas was a perfect reflection of Milwaukee. You know, never took things too terribly seriously. You do your job and you go home, you know. And that's why he was such a big fit. Rick Manning had some good play in Milwaukee. Not great. Got it done. I think there are people in Milwaukee who still hold kind of a grudge against Manning because he didn't give Paul Molitor a chance to hit and extend his hitting streak. But, you know, it's out there. Brewers are a National League team now, and you just kind of have to see what happens.
Our guest has been Mr. Gary Ellenbolt. Fascinating interview. We're out of time. Gary, do you have any final words for our audience?
Do something you enjoy in your life. If you have a job where you're treated well, you like what you do, you know the difference between getting to go to work and having to go to work, then you just about have it made. But if you have the right family in life, and I do, and I just have wonderful people in my family, a great wife, 2 sons who've pretty much grown up to be people, and of course the granddaughter. So, you know, this is still the greatest country in the world where you can change your situation. It might take a while, but, you know, give it every shot and just be happy. Take in a ball game. You know, we're finally getting rid of COVID, so go out, get some sunshine, enjoy baseball. You can make it the Stockton Ports. Well, so much the better. But, you know, just do your best. Leave everything, on the table or however that expression goes, and just be happy.
Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show, Gary, and, the main thing to me in life is to be a good person, and obviously you come across very clearly as a good person, and that's so important for your listeners, because, you know, you're like a friend to them as they listen to the game, and it's nice to have a good person coming into your home, and obviously you are that. So thanks so much for coming on the show. Very wonderful interview.
I hope so, Peter. I thank you, and hope Cleveland has a good year, and love to do it again sometime.
Right. We'll definitely. So thanks again, Mr. Gary Ellenbolt. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mr. Gary Ellenbolt.
Glad to do it. Thank you.